When a neglected stray dog is taken in by a struggling family, they have no idea the animal they almost abandoned will one night risk everything to save their lives from a raging house fire. But what the dog does next shocks the entire town. Before starting the story, make sure to subscribe the channel so that you don't miss any update in future. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. Mud clung to everything. The broken fence, the peeling porch, and especially to the shivering dog curled beneath the thorny bush at the edge of the vacant lot. Its ribs showed through its patchy fur, and its eyes held a look, not of fear, but of something worse, resignation. He didn't bark when the boy passed him by. He didn't even lift his head. Just another shadow in a world that had forgotten him. Inside the tiny, worn-out house just past the lot, 10-year-old Daniel slammed the front door behind him, dripping water onto the warped wooden floor. His mother, Elise, looked up from the flickering stove, her face pale from exhaustion. "Daniel," she whispered, trying not to wake the baby in the next room. "You walked again?" He nodded, dropping his soaked backpack by the door. Bus pass expired. Elise closed her eyes for a second. "I'm sorry, honey." He shrugged. "I'm used to it." But he wasn't. Neither of them was. Ever since their father had left them with nothing but a disconnected phone bill and a broken-down car, every day had been survival. Every dollar stretched. Every meal cut just a little thinner. And every night, Daniel would peek through the window before bed, watching that dog across the street. Still there. Still not moving. "I think he's dying," he said one night. Elise looked over his shoulder and sighed. "I don't think we can help him, sweetheart. But we have to." She shook her head. "We can't afford to feed ourselves." That silence between them, between compassion and reality, was the same silence that wrapped itself around their home every night. A silence that pressed against the walls like a weight. The kind of silence that makes even children feel old. But the next morning, Daniel did what kids always do. He rebelled. He took the crust from his sandwich, snuck it into his jacket, and walked across the street. The dog didn't move when he approached. "Hey," Daniel whispered. "You okay?" The dog slowly turned its head. One eye was swollen shut, and the other glistened. Wet, not from rain, but something deeper. Pain? Hope? Daniel slowly held out the crust. The dog sniffed. Then, for the first time in who knows how long, it wagged its tail. Just once. A flicker. And that was all it took. From that day, the dog started waiting for Daniel. Even if it didn't move, even if it didn't eat much, it would try to stand when it saw him. It would blink slowly when Daniel whispered stories to it, about school, about his mom's old music, about how his little sister giggled in her sleep even when there was no milk for breakfast. Then came the day Elise finally noticed. She saw Daniel pouring leftover soup into a plastic lid and walking out the door. "Daniel," she called sharply. "What are you doing?" He hesitated. "Feeding someone who needs it more." She followed him outside. Rain again. The kind that soaks your bones in seconds. And there he was, the dog. A little stronger. His head lifting. His tail thumping weakly against the wet dirt. Elise stood there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Mom, look," Daniel pleaded. "He's just like us." She didn't answer. That night, they brought him in, wrapped in an old towel, dried by a hairdryer held together with duct tape. The dog, now named Rusty, lay by the heater like he belonged there. The baby giggled for the first time in days. Elise smiled and cried at the same time. For the first time, warmth filled the room that wasn't from the barely working radiator. It came from something else. Something none of them could name. Like they had just let love back in, and it had fur. Weeks passed. Rusty gained weight. His fur grew and thicker. He followed Daniel everywhere. He lay next to the baby's crib like a guardian, even when the wind howled outside like it wanted to take the house down with it. But strange things started happening. One night, around 2 a.m., Rusty began to bark. Loud, guttural, desperate. Daniel sat up in bed. Elise ran into the hallway, panicked. "Rusty." The dog stood stiffly at the front door, growling low. There was nothing outside. But this wasn't the last time. The next week, he did it again. And again. Each time, louder, closer to the center of the house. The third time, he dragged Daniel out of bed by tugging his blanket and stood in front of the bedroom door, staring at the ceiling, barking. "Stop it, Rusty." Elise had snapped. "You're scaring the baby." But he wouldn't stop. Daniel looked up and saw something he couldn't explain. A tiny crack in the ceiling and a flicker of black. "Soot," he whispered, but it vanished. Rusty kept growling. The fourth night was the last normal one. The next would change everything. They didn't know that the air was already poisoned with gas. They didn't know the wiring in the attic was fraying, sparking like a snake's tongue waiting to strike. They didn't know that Rusty had smelled it for days, and no one had listened. Yet. The night air was still, too still. No rain, no wind, just the eerie silence that makes your skin crawl without knowing why. It was the kind of silence that makes even shadows feel heavy. Inside the little house, the lights were out. Elise had finally managed to put the baby down. Her arms trembled as she adjusted the thin blanket over the crib, more from exhaustion than effort. She looked over at Daniel, asleep on the couch with a worn-out school book still resting on his chest. His legs were too long for the sofa now. He had grown taller, thinner, older than 10. Rusty lay at the center of the room, eyes wide open, ears twitching. He hadn't slept, not properly, not for days. Something inside him had changed. An instinct, a scent, a whisper in his animal bones. It started with a flicker. At first, Elise thought it was just the heater clicking again. But Rusty stood up sharply, a deep growl rising in his chest. Then came the smell. Not smoke, yet, but something sharp, bitter, like burning wires. Elise sniffed, confused. She turned toward the kitchen, then froze. A low, electrical hum filled the air. Then it happened. A flash, brief but blinding, from above. A faint crackling from the ceiling. Then silence again. Elise looked up. What was that? And then Rusty barked. Not like before. Not nervous, not warning. This was a scream. A desperate, guttural, soul-ripping bark that shook the baby awake. Then came the smoke. Thin at first, slipping through the vents like a ghost. Then more. Thicker. Black. Elise screamed. "Daniel, wake up." He shot up, coughing. "Fire," she yelled, grabbing the baby as she ran to him. But it was too late for the front door. The hallway was already choked with smoke. Flames licked down from the ceiling, curling around the walls like fingers reaching for them. The back window. Daniel pointed. But the fire was faster. And then Rusty ran. Not away. Not to safety. He ran straight into the kitchen. "Rusty!" Daniel screamed after him. But the dog didn't look back. The boy coughed, eyes burning. The smoke stung like needles. The baby cried in Elise's arms, her tiny body shaking. They backed into the bathroom, the only place without smoke pouring in yet. But it was getting hotter. The fire was moving like it was alive. Angry. Hungry. Then bang. The kitchen door slammed shut. Then another sound. Glass shattering. Then silence again. Elise dropped to her knees, pressing wet towels under the door. Her voice cracked. "We're trapped." Daniel turned to the small bathroom window. It was sealed shut, painted over years ago. But then something incredible happened. A loud crash. And then cold air. Smoke swirling. A shape, black and ash-covered, burst through the hallway. Rusty. He had smashed open the back kitchen window, shattered it with his own body, and pushed through burning debris. His fur was scorched. His paws were bleeding. But his eyes, those eyes were alive. He barked twice. Short. Urgent. He turned. Then looked back at them. "Go. Now." Daniel coughed violently. "He's showing us the way." Elise hesitated for just a second. Then she tightened her grip on the baby and followed. Rusty led them through the smoke, his body low, his tail flicking like a guide. They ran, crawling half the way, barely able to see, the heat chasing them like a monster. Then, finally, the cold slap of night air. They tumbled out the broken window, into the dirt behind the house. Gasping, crying, alive. Daniel turned, his voice cracking. Rusty. But he wasn't behind them. Smoke poured from the window. Elise screamed, Rusty. And then, a shadow.
Coughing. Stumbling.
Rusty fell out of the window, his front leg twisted, burned, blackened in places. He limped forward and collapsed. Daniel dropped to his knees beside him, stroking his face. No, no, no. Don't you leave us. Rusty's tail twitched once, then twice, and then stillness. Sirens howled in the distance. Flashing red lights cut through the trees. Neighbors gathered, shocked. The house was gone within minutes, engulfed, swallowed, consumed by fire like it had never existed. But the family? They were alive. Because of a dog no one wanted. Because of a creature who had been left to die and still chose to save. At the hospital, Daniel sat beside Rusty's bed, refusing to sleep. The vet worked without pause. Burns, smoke inhalation, paw injuries, deep lacerations. But Rusty was breathing. Will he make it? Daniel asked. The vet looked at him. He shouldn't have, but he's still fighting. News spread fast. Within hours, local channels were covering the story. Abandoned dog saves family from fire. Reporters outside the hospital. Donations pouring in. People from across the city offering help, shelter, food. But none of that mattered to Daniel. He just wanted Rusty to open his eyes. 2 days later, he did.
Barely.
But he saw Daniel and wagged his tail. And that was all it took. The entire waiting room clapped. Elise wept into her hands. The baby laughed again.
And Rusty?
He licked Daniel's hand.
Weakly. Slowly.
But full of love. Not for saving him, but for letting him belong. They had saved each other. And now the world was watching. Rusty was awake, but barely. The tubes, the beeping machines, the sterile hospital light. It all surrounded him like a second battle. His eyes fluttered open only now and then, and each time he did, Daniel was there, sitting right beside him, holding his paw like it was the only thing anchoring him to the world. On the third morning, the nurse quietly stepped into the room and knelt beside Daniel. She whispered, "He made it through the worst." Daniel didn't speak. He just nodded slowly. A tear traced down his cheek and landed on Rusty's fur. Rusty blinked once and weakly nudged Daniel's hand with his nose. The nurse stood back up, staring at the scene in front of her. "That's not just a pet," she murmured. "That's a guardian." Outside the small animal clinic, a different world was forming. Reporters stood in a tight pack, cameras pointed at the door. Neighbors passed by with flowers and stuffed toys, placing them carefully on the windowsill beneath a hand-painted sign that read, "Thank you, Rusty." A local bakery delivered a bag of warm bread to Elise and Daniel each morning. The fire department's chief came personally to meet them, choking up as he handed Rusty a tiny medal. He saved a family. That makes him one of us. Daniel held it in his hands, as if it weighed more than any trophy ever could. But something else was coming. A story that no one expected. One that turned everything they knew upside down. It started with a man, late 50s, wore a dark jacket, ball cap, and had a scar above his right brow. He walked into the vet clinic without saying a word and asked only one question. "Is there a dog named Rusty here?" The receptionist blinked. "Yes, but wait. How do you?" The man didn't wait. He stepped into the room slowly. Elise looked up confused. Daniel clutched Rusty tighter. The man stared at the dog for a long moment, and then his shoulders fell, as if the breath had left his body. His eyes began to fill with tears. He sat down across from them. I think that's my dog." Elise's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? I lost him 2 years ago, during a storm. He ran off while I was at work. We searched for days, posted signs, drove to every shelter. Nothing. We thought he died." Daniel looked from Rusty to the man. How do you know it's him?" The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a faded photograph. There he was. Rusty, young, healthy, tail mid-wag, between 2 children and a woman holding a birthday cake. "My daughter named him Rusty after her favorite crayon." He used to sleep by her bed. He never barked unless something was wrong. He smiled faintly, then choked up. Same dog, same eyes, same heart. Elise was speechless. Rusty stirred slightly. His ears lifted, and his eyes met the man's. For a moment, it was like the room froze. Rusty let out a low, soft whimper. Not afraid, not confused, recognizing. The man wiped his eyes. I don't want to take him from you. Clearly, he's found you for a reason. But I had to know he made it. Daniel swallowed hard. You don't want him back? The man shook his head.
No.
He has a purpose now. He stood, gently placed the photo on the table and smiled. Thank you for loving him. And then he left. Daniel stared at the photo. Rusty looked exactly the same, but something was different now. Back then, he was someone's pet. Now, he was a hero. That evening, a local news anchor read the story live on air. Tonight, we bring you a tale that's melted hearts across the state. A stray dog, once lost, now found, rescued a family from a devastating fire. But the truth is, this dog had a family of his own once, and somehow, through heartbreak and time, he still chose to save another. The footage rolled, Rusty limping through smoke, Daniel sobbing beside him, the scorched kitchen window, the metal around his neck. Social media exploded. Millions of views. Messages from around the world. Rusty is a miracle. This is what love looks like. I cried watching this. Thank you for sharing. One message stood out, posted by a young girl from another state. I'm scared of losing my dog, but Rusty showed me that love doesn't go away. It just finds a new way to protect you. Daniel read that message again and again. A week later, the family stood outside their burned-down home. Or what was left of it.
Ash.
Charred wood. A single piece of roof, slanted like a broken wing. But in the middle of it all was a rose bush. It hadn't burned. Not even wilted. Elise crouched beside it, touching its leaves. We planted this when we moved in. Your father said it'd bloom even in the worst soil. Daniel stared at it. Maybe Rusty did more than save us. Maybe he saved something we couldn't see. Hope. 2 months later, their life looked very different. The town raised money for their new home. Volunteers helped build it. Rusty had a new orthopedic bed by the fireplace. His scars remained, but so did his strength. He walked slower now, but with pride. He was no longer abandoned. He was family. And when the fire chief came by to deliver a final gift, an official badge and a custom collar that read, Rescue Hero, Daniel slipped it on Rusty himself. The dog wagged his tail, stronger now, more sure of his place in the world. That night, as the wind whispered through the trees and the stars blinked quietly above, Daniel lay beside Rusty on the floor, one arm over his back. You didn't just save us, he whispered. You made us whole again. Rusty blinked slowly and sighed. Not a tired sigh, a peaceful one, because he knew he was finally home. Even those who are forgotten, broken, or abandoned can carry within them the power to save and heal others. True loyalty comes not from blood, but from love, trust, and silent sacrifices. Rusty wasn't just a dog. He was a reminder that kindness given in the darkest moment can return as a miracle in disguise.